The hearing with Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard with FTC has come to a close, but there is no ruling yet. However, today we're going to be taking a look at an article written by IGN talking about the 12 surprising things so far in this trial. This has been an ongoing trial for the last 5 days, and there's a lot to go over. So make sure you guys stay locked in and pay attention because there's going to be a lot of stuff that's coming up for gaming, especially when it comes to Microsoft and Activision Blizzard. But before we get into today's story, make sure you guys check out our new RetroYuuki Gaming News Twitter, RY Gaming News, as well, because we're going to be covering that stuff over there too. And make sure you guys like and subscribe here on YouTube, and we will be talking about the gaming blog very soon. But now it's time for court in terms of today's story. 12 surprising reveals from the Xbox FTC trial. This is written on IGN by Logan Plant, written on June 30th, 2023 at 11:54 a.m. And this is going to be nuts. So let's read. The Microsoft FTC trial is a wrap. And while we don't have a ruin yet, we've learned a lot from the inside industry information that's usually not available to the public. From drama surrounding the exclusivity of Starfield and other Bethesda titles to the cost of producing huge AAA projects like The Last of Us 2, there were plenty of bombshell reveals from this week's court battle. Here are 12 big things we learned from the Xbox FTC hearing. For those of you who do not know, FTC, in the case of law, is Federal Trade Commission. Microsoft acquires Activision Blizzard. The story so far. Xbox admits it lost the console wars. Everybody believes in the console wars, so Xbox lost, according to this article. The entire Xbox Activision Blizzard saga has been filled with both Microsoft and Sony downplaying their respective achievements to appear as meek as possible to regulators. The FTC hearing was no exception, as this week kicked off with news of Microsoft claiming Xbox has officially so-called, quote, lost the console war. Microsoft claimed that its original Xbox was crushed by Sony and Nintendo when it entered the market in 2001, and the company said that it's losing the console wars ever since. Citing numbers from 2021, Microsoft said Xbox held a 16% share of the console video games markets. Xbox Phil Spencer also said a piece on the console wars, calling it a, quote, social construct within the community during its testimony. Very interesting, because a lot of people think when it comes to the console wars, way back in the day, a lot of people started arguing. I like Xbox, I like PlayStation, I like Nintendo, and everybody goes to PlayStation and Nintendo, and Xbox gets left behind in a bit. That's the console wars for you. And looking at this part, 16% of the share of the video games market. That looks like a lot, it's not. Okay? Let's continue. Microsoft says a next generation could start 2028. Years of hardware shortages and a slew of cross-generation game releases can make it feel like this console generation just started. But the reality is that we're creeping up on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S third birthday parties. In court documents reviewed by IGN, Microsoft is expecting the next generation, meaning the PlayStation 6 and the successor to the Xbox Series X and S, to begin in 2028. If Microsoft's projection remains accurate, this means that we are just a year and a half away from the halfway point of this current generation. 2028 places PS5 and Xbox Series on a 8-year cycle. which is 1 year longer than the PS4 and Xbox One, and roughly the same length as the Xbox 360 and PS3 generation. So with that, we can conclude, or we can see that they're trying to make it an 8 year cycle with with the new with the new generation PlayStation 6 and whatever the Xbox is going to be called at that point. 2028 I think is a good idea, but remember this is just like a little prediction like it said here. The article is about to continue with the acquisitions. Let's have a look at what the acquisitions were supposed to be. Microsoft wanted to scoop up Bungie, Sega, Square Enix, Zynga, and more. The last few years have seen the gaming industry's biggest players go on an acquisition spree. We've seen Sony acquire Bungie, Microsoft acquire Bethesda, and a lot more. But in court documents, we learned that Microsoft had plans for big name transactions that didn't end up happening. Namely, Microsoft had conversations about acquiring Sega, Square Enix, Zynga, and even Bungie before Sony bought them. But Microsoft's ambitions went well beyond these big players. Internal documents reveal a list of 100 developers Microsoft considered at one point, before narrowing it down to 8 final candidates. This included Hades developers Supergiant Games, Pokemon Go's Niantic, IO Actor Interactive, and more. And I actually recovered this part a few days ago when we started the commentaries. If you guys want to learn more about that, make sure you guys check out the past episodes because we actually did the episode on Sega and Bungie. And the episode there was supposed to be about how Xbox wanted to use them to acquire them to bolster the Xbox Game Pass. If you want to learn more about that particular episode, make sure you guys check it out when at the end. Now we're going to take a look at $200 million plus to produce AAA games. And let's have a look. AAA Sony games cost $200 million plus to produce. We've always known modern AAA gaming video games cost a lot of money to make. But now we have a good idea of just how expensive some of the games are. In a poorly redacted document submitted by Sony Interactive Entertainment, we learned that The Last of Us Part 2 cost $200 million to develop, while Horizon Forbidden West is $212 million. In the document, PlayStation said the costs are justified because AAA games, quote, create deep and ongoing engagement with players. These costs have given more context to recent comments from Xbox Game Studios' Matt Booty, who said big budget AAA games cost a half a decade or more to make, and failure can potentially ruin a studio. And he has a point. He has a point there when it comes to cost and it comes to engagement with players and how it can ruin a studio. Because if you look at it that way, it does cost a lot of money to make. Especially nowadays, you have the production costs, you have all the resources you have to buy, you have all the people making the game, and all that good stuff. And it is a lot of money to make one game, especially AAA games. Even if it's good or bad, doesn't matter because the cost is a lot. Now we're going to be talking about Call of Duty in terms of like money. Let's have a look. Call of Duty is, in fact, worth a lot of money. Unsurprisingly, Call of Duty was at the center of almost the entire courtroom battle over this week. Activision's biggest asset came up repeatedly, with the FTC raising concerns about exclusivity or the potential of Activision releasing a worse version of COD on PlayStation. Call of Duty's impact makes sense, given that the same poorly redacted document from Sony revealed that Call of Duty generated over $800 million for PlayStation in the United States in 2021 alone. From Phil Spencer testifying under oath that Xbox will keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. To claims that Activision CEO Bobby Kotick threatened to pull Call of Duty from Xbox unless Microsoft granted Activision a higher revenue share, we learned a lot about value of the franchise to both Sony and Microsoft. And I'm not surprised because it is going to be $800 million because you have the microtransactions, you have the bundles, you have the game itself. The game itself costs $70 to buy. Then you have those overpriced microtransactions, by the way, which I don't know why people are buying them. And then you have like the pay to win bundles, especially in the new Call of Duty games. Then the drama going on with I want to do this, I want to do that, especially with higher revenue share. That's how it will be interested. Now we're going to read about how Starfield exclusivity is anti-competitive. Let's have a look. Jim Ryan doesn't think Starfield's exclusivity versus is anti-competitive and says PlayStation will be fine. PlayStation boss Jim Ryan made it very clear that he's not a fan of Starfield's Xbox exclusivity. That being said, he admitted he doesn't think it's anti-competitive. Publicly, PlayStation has been the biggest opponent of the Microsoft Activision merger, but privately, it's a bit of a different story. In an email sent to Microsoft after Microsoft announced its intent to acquire Activision Blizzard, Ryan wrote, quote, "I'm pretty sure we will continue to see Call of Duty on PlayStation for many years to come," end quote, expressing that PlayStation would be more than okay if the transaction was approved. In my eyes, I actually agree. Because with Sony, with the Activision and with the Call of Duty is going to survive no matter what platform that thing is on because of the microtransactions, because of the money, because of the revenue they generated. Just like we just mentioned earlier, they generated over $800 million, especially with the microtransactions. Now we're going to be taking a look at Starfield almost skipping Xbox. Starfield almost skipped Xbox entirely. Starfield is coming out this September as an Xbox exclusive. But that wasn't always going to be the case. Xbox boss Phil Spencer confirmed that Starfield was potentially going to skip Xbox entirely prior to Microsoft's acquisition of ZeniMax. Xbox was worried about losing out on Starfield after PlayStation's exclusivity deals for Bethesda games like Ghostwire Tokyo and Deathloop. Spencer said Microsoft had to secure content for Xbox to, quote, remain viable in the business, end quote. Xbox did so by acquiring ZeniMax altogether, locking down Starfield as an Xbox exclusive. I'm not going to be surprised if it's going to be exclusive to Xbox at the end of the day. Okay? But there's a lot going to be acquisitions here. And now we have this stuff going on. Let's continue with drama surrounding Bethesda exclusivity, Indiana Jones, Elder Scrolls, and more. And Elder Scrolls game is coming out soon. The FTC tried to prove that Xbox treatment of ZeniMax games could demonstrate how the company will handle exclusivity when it comes to Activision Blizzard games. One piece of evidence that was used a lot as a chat exchange between Xbox Tim Stewart and Matt Booty, the chat log focused on a November 2021 meeting where Phil Spencer apparently decided to make make all future Bethesda games Xbox exclusive, not just a new IP. Exclusives came up a number of different ways during the hearing, specifically in regard to ZeniMax Studios. We learned that Machine Games' upcoming AAA game, Indiana Jones game, was at one point said to be a multi-platform release, before Microsoft's acquisition changed plans. In terms of other future games, Spencer claimed that the final decisions of platforms for upcoming Bethesda games like Obsidian's The Outer Worlds 2 and Bethesda Games Studios' The Elder Scrolls 6 have not been made yet. But with Spencer's apparent decision in mind, it seems like deciding Xbox exclusivity for those titles could be more of a formality than an actual decision at this point. And this is going to be big because this is going to be very big because there's a lot of new games coming out, and now that we have a feeling about Elder Scrolls 6 and Outer Worlds 2, will it be Xbox exclusive in the future? And this is why a lot of people are looking at to this case too, especially with the FTC. So look out for a lot more commentaries on Xbox as well. Let's continue by talking about the Elder Scrolls 6 is long ways off. Elder Scrolls 6 is long way off. Speaking of the Elder Scrolls 6, don't expect to play the Skyrim follow-up anytime soon. We already knew that Elder Scrolls 6 was set to be at Bethesda Game Studio next priority following Starfield, with Fallout 5 coming after TES 6. But Spencer said the game is still so quote 5+ years away, end quote. 5 years from now is 2028. Interesting. Which puts us in the window for the next console generation we discussed earlier. So it's entirely possible that Elder Scrolls 6 could be a cross-generation release, or skip this current generation of consoles entirely. Now, when it comes to Elder Scrolls 6, I don't play this game, but I do know, sidebar, that there is a grandmother out there that actually plays Elder Scrolls. I'm not sure if she's still alive, but this is devastating to her because 2028 is a long time away. Because she's a grandmother now. And she is known as the, I believe she's known as the Elder Scrolls grandma. But that aside, 2028, as we discussed earlier in the article, is in line with the new generation of console, PlayStation 6, and whatever Xbox is going to be called their next generation. Could this be a true point, though? We'll see. We have to see how far the Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be. Now let's take a look at how everyone says they don't like exclusives. For all the talk of exclusives, multiple industry figures took the stand and said they aren't big fans of exclusive games. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella said, quote, he has no love for console exclusives, end quote, and that Microsoft plays the exclusive game to stay competitive in the market leaders. Activision CEO Bobby Kotick agreed, saying making Call of Duty Xbox exclusive isn't in Activision's best interest, and it would actually be detrimental to business. And quote, he said, you would alienate over 100 million monthly players, 100 million monthly active players, Kotick said. Half of them play on phones, but the rest of them play on computer and PlayStation. And you would have to have a revolt if you were to remove the game from more than one platform. Gamers are very passionate, and so with that kind of investment time and quote and effort, you have an enthusiastic, passionate group of people. End quote. So what we can draw from that is that exclusive exclusive stuff they don't like. And he's actually correct. Kotick is actually correct here when it comes to exclusives here. You are alienating a lot of people if you go to exclusivity, because you're going from one console to another and you're going to stick on that console for who knows how long based on the deal that you make with that particular company. For example, well, there's a lot of examples out there. There are certain games that are exclusive to the digital market. Then you have the exclusive games to Sony. For example, I believe one of them examples could be the God of War series that is usually out on Sony. So that's exclusive. And there's plenty more of examples out there. So make sure you guys do your research on that. And he's right, half of them play on phones. And now the mobile market is being tapped into because of that fact. And yes, I do have an iPhone. So make sure you guys check it out, take a look at that. Mobile market games are the big boys when it comes to outside. Now we're gonna take a look at Game Pass. Xbox Game Pass to be exact. Let's have a look at this portion. Sony's Jim Ryan and Activision's Bobby Kotick had words for Game Pass. PlayStation boss Jim Ryan had strong words for Xbox Game Pass, claiming he, quote, talked to all the publishers and they unanimously do not like Game Pass because it's value destructive, end quote. Ryan also claimed Game Pass is unprofitable for Microsoft. IGN reached out to Xbox for comment, and Xbox pointed out that every Game Pass title announced at this month's Xbox Game Showcase, which was just a few weeks ago, is coming from a creator that's previously worked on the subscription service. And there are multiple examples of publishers in favor of Xbox Game Pass, so it's not entirely clear who Ryan was referring to. We know that Activision's Bobby Kotick doesn't want to see his games on subscription services. As he said, quote, I don't agree with the idea of a multi-game subscription service as a business proposition going forwards. But we, Activision and Microsoft, can agree to disagree. And looking at this portion of the article, we can see that Xbox Game Pass, for those of you who never heard of this, Xbox Game Pass allows you to download games for a subscription service fee of about $10 per month. Good content, by the way. And there's a lot of cool games down there, so make sure you guys check it out. But if we're taking a look at this article, reading based on what we have seen so far, he has a point here. Kotick has a point here, according to this reading, that multi-game subscription service as a business proposition. That's a tough take right there. That's a really tough take there. Does everybody like Game Pass or does everybody like PlayStation Plus? That's where it's going down to in that area. Now we're going to be taking a look at the final portion of this document, but I do not think this is the last part of the hearing. The ruling is the next part. For this final portion, let's have a look at why Bobby Kotick of Activision regrets not supporting the Nintendo Switch. Activision CEO Bobby Kotick regrets not supporting Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch is an undeniable smash hit. But that wasn't obvious to everyone when Nintendo was emerging from the Nintendo Wii U era in 2017. By the way, that console sucked. In fact, even Activision's Bobby Kotick underestimated that Nintendo Switch when he saw a prototype for the machine. Now, he admits it was a mistake not to develop more software for Switch, and says Activision will consider putting Call of Duty on future Nintendo consoles once they have the specs on the next device. what everybody still rumored about, by the way. There are still a lot to read about regarding this week's huge trial while we wait for a ruling. Check out our analysis piece about how Microsoft Mask is slipping and Activision claims that FTC doesn't really understand the industry, and IGN senior reporter Rebecca Valentine was in the courtroom all week long, and she wrote analysis for recaps of every day of the hearing, or for all the news highlights, check out our full recap of the Microsoft FTC hearing. Oh my goodness. This is not over. Just because the trial is over doesn't mean this whole hearing is over. There still needs to be a ruling. So, based on what we learned here, there's a lot of stuff to read. So I'm going to link you guys the article so that you guys can read on your own, because that was a lot. But I'm going to tell you, based on what we read in this particular IGN article, this could get nuts, especially in the next generation. Like we saw, Microsoft said that the next generation could start 2028. And speaking of 2028, not only that, we learned that the new Elder Scrolls game, Elder Scrolls 6, could be in 2028, which means that Elder Scrolls 6, according to this article, and according to Microsoft, could come out, and according to Bethesda, could come out in time for what is the predicted date or year of the new generation of console, which is going to be 2028, according to this meeting here. Then we talk about exclusivity and how everyone doesn't love it, and how about Game Pass, and how Activision CEO regretted not supporting the Switch. I'm now going to talk about my takes on a few of the topics here. The Nintendo Switch one. That one was more interesting, because what would have happened if Call of Duty ended up as a Nintendo Switch product? Because remember, Nintendo is known for being kid friendly most of the time, of course. And would they allow a Call of Duty game on the Switch? They have in the past, but not recently. And now with new games coming out, new indie games, and new stuff coming out, will Activision change their mind about the Nintendo Switch? I have a Nintendo Switch. I give it to I travel with that thing, and it's fun to play. So a Call of Duty on the go, that sounds pretty fun. And now Activision CEO is regretting not using it to their advantage. Then talking about my point about the Call of Duty thing being worth a lot of money, that's facts. All you have to look at is the Steam numbers sometimes, because $800 million is not far off, because that's definitely for sure as a franchise plus, because of the microtransactions, because of the bundles, because of buying the game. Buying the game is $70 already. Bundles are worth $30 at most. And remember, you have other microtransactions in there. And is based on, and talking about exclusivity being anti-competitive, PlayStation will be fine. PlayStation is going to be fine regardless of Call of Duty on PlayStation or Xbox, because Call of Duty is Call of Duty. It's never going to go down. Just remember, look at what happened with what's going on with Call of Duty 2. The controversy there too with Nick Merckx. That one was a huge story too. And then talking about the exclusivity with Elder Scrolls and Indiana Jones. That one was interesting too, because now they changed their plans about exclusivity when it comes to like what happened with the article. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to read. And all the links will be described in this same article. So if you guys want to read it, I'm going to post up the big boy, the IGN article, and then you can go ahead and read the rest. Okay? That is going to do it for this is probably the biggest commentary of the year. But there's more. So check out my Twitter, AY Gaming News, excuse me, RY Gaming News, I meant to say, at RY Gaming News. I'm going to be giving you guys more to read as I go on vacation. And just because I'm on vacation doesn't mean I'm not reading articles. I'm going to break them down in a small concept so that you guys can get the news straight from the source. We'll see you guys on our next gaming commentary. Oh boy, let the stuff happen. And today's question of the day: do you think Microsoft is really going to acquire Activision Blizzard? Let me know in the comments below. And how wild will be the 2028 if we get there? Enjoy and have fun with that one.